Rambam, the laws of tsaras. Tsaras is a skin disease back in biblical times that came from speaking ill. Imagine you don't speak properly, you get a skin disease. It's the idea that everything that happens in the physical world is really a reflection of the spiritual world. That's the idea, which is a pretty awesome idea. Yeah. Excuse me. Okay, we're in chapter 5. It's a very detailed understanding. Okay, so uh, this impurity. So the following principles apply with regard to a person who had a wound on the flesh, right, of his skin, and the skin peeled away because of the wound. If the wound came about because of fire, meaning he was burned by coal, embers, iron, or stone that were heated in fire, or the like, this is called a mitzvah, a burn. If the wound did not come about because of fire, he received a blister from a stone, right? Wood or the like, or the wound came about because of the infirmity within the body, some sickness in the body, a wart, eczema that ruined the skin, or swelling lesions, feverish swellings or infections that ruin the skin. It is called a shchin, a boil. Ah, my apologies. I'm coming off a cold. I don't have a cold anymore. I just sort of have some leftovers. Okay. Okay, so we have a difference between a burn, a michveh, right? And a boil, a shchin, that develops on the skin, right? So the following does apply if one heated a spit hit hit a person with it. If its end was rounded, the wound it produces is considered as a burn. If its end was pointed, it's an unresolved question if it's considered a burn or a boil. Okay, because maybe it was a puncture. It wasn't the heat. Maybe it was a puncture. Okay. When a person suffers a burn because of a hot springs of Tiberias or olive dregs or the like, the affliction is considered a boil. It's not considered a burn, right? Okay. As long as boils and burns are fresh, festering wounds, they are called mordin and do not impart impurity because of tsaras at all. Now, just because you have that, right? What Rambam is saying, that doesn't make it tsaras, doesn't make the impurity this skin disease. It could be a place where the skin disease could erupt, right? So that itself doesn't impart impurity. But if the boil of the burn heals, and the afflicted person's flesh was entirely restored, even though there's a scar on the place and it's not entirely like other skin, it is considered like ordinary skin with regard to all matters. Such a person is deemed impure because of the 3 signs mentioned above, and he is isolated for 2 weeks as part of the process of determination as explained. Okay. Okay, we need to understand further. Let's read further. We'll get a better understanding of what's going on over here. So there are three signs that make you impure for tsaras, for this skin disease, right? And that's two white hairs that grew in the boil, right? Or in it, there was healthy flesh that grew, surrounded by non-healthy, and there was an increase of the size of the blemish, right? So over here, this person doesn't have that, but it is a potential to become, so that's why he's isolated for the process, to see if will two hairs grow in there, will healthy flesh be in the middle of it, or will it grow? Those that makes it into tsaras, into this um, unhealthy or this impure state. Okay. So in number 4, if the boil or the burn began to heal and be restored, like a scab like with the thickness of a garlic peel, forming over them, this is the scarring of a boil mentioned in the Torah, and the healing burn mentioned there. They impart impurity because of two signs: white hair, or the increase of the size of the blemish. And such a blemish is isolated only for 1 week. Right? So the isolation is in order to see, will the white hairs grow in there? Will it increase? So what is implied? There was a beharit on the scarring of the boil or the healing of a burn. Okay, so there was a scar of a boil or there was a healing of a burn. Right? So it burned. Now came there a beharit. Now beharit is this white looking, this clear whitish tint that's below the skin that developed there. That becomes now the beginning, right? Now, if it contained two white hairs, the person should be deemed definitively impure, right? Because you need only one of the three signs. So if you had two white hairs in there, in this area that came after a healing of a burn, right, or of a boil, it healed, a scar was left, and now a flesh that the flesh, our flesh is dark, got a dark, it's either pinkish or it's got a, I don't know what color you would call. But if it turns kind of whitish and then two white hairs, that's definitively tsaras and the person's impure. If it does not contain white hair, he should be isolated for a week and examined at the end of the week. If white hair grew or the size of the blemish increased, he should be deemed definitively impure. So there's two ways here that we're saying, if the beharis, these under the skin blemish of whiteness, there's kind of 40 different shades of white. Like let's say eggshell, right? White developed and it grew. Then you're for sure impure. Or if two white hairs grew in there, then you're impure. If there's no new development, it should be released from the inspection process. If the size of the blemish increased or white hair after he was released from the inspection process, should be deemed definitively impure. So you're released. And you're put into isolation because it may develop. But after the isolation, then it didn't develop, then you're not in isolation anymore. But what if it did develop? Then you're pure, impure rather. You're impure. In other words, if two white hairs then grew in, then you're impure. Is that clear? Okay. I hope you got that. Any questions on that? Because that's it for today. Amazing. All right, folks. Here we continue. God bless you. Have a